On today's episode of the show, we're explaining just how challenging it's going to be for Louisville to replace both Jawhar Jordan and Isaac Guerendo. Can Maurice Turner finally be the guy? What should we expect from Miami transfer Don Chaney Jr.? And what does the season hold for Keyjuan Brown and Isaac Brown? All that coming up on today's episode of Locked On Louisville.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Card Nation, what is going on? Welcome into this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. As always, I'm your host, Dalton Pence. Today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. As always, I want to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder that the Locked On Louisville podcast is free and available on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. We continue along in our position preview series ahead of the 2024 college football season. We discuss the running backs position on today's episode of the show, explaining how challenging it's going to be to replace both Jaws and Guerendo, but there are some players waiting in the wings. Maurice Turner, Don Chaney Jr. could form a solid backfield for the Cardinals. You have some underclassmen like Keyjuan Brown and Isaac Brown that we will discuss whether or not this could be a breakout type season for both of those guys. And then we'll just overall discuss the by committee approach, what the carry share is going to look like, and what will this running back rotation look like at the end of the season. So it's no secret that the Cardinals have a tall task ahead of them. They're replacing two very, very good running backs. Jawhar Jordan, over 1,000-yard rusher, even with him dealing with multiple injuries at the back end of the season. And then Isaac Guerendo had double-digit rushing touchdowns. He was phenomenal in the last 6 to 7 games of the year. Replacing that 1-2 punch, it's going to be very challenging, nonetheless. Running the ball was Louisville's bread and butter last year on offense, as the passing game kind of struggled to get going, which seemed to be very uncharacteristic of a Jeff Brom-led offense. Now, statistically, nothing's really going to jump off the page from last season. They were 37th in yards per game with about 180. I think it's like 178.5. The average just under 4.7 yards per carry. A lot of things can go into statistics and statistical averages. So I don't really want to use that as a huge measuring stick outside of maybe like the yards per carry number, because I think that you're going to see Louisville open up the playbook a little bit more. The Cardinals are going to throw the ball more with Tyler Shuck than they did Jack Plummer. So if you look at this and compare, side by side at the end of this upcoming season and say, well, they didn't necessarily rush for as many yards per game, so they didn't have that good or as good of a season as you had the year before rushing the ball. I don't think that really tells the full tale. I think if you can get anything from this episode, if you take away anything from what I say, it's that it is an extremely difficult thing to replace both Jawhar Jordan and Isaac Guerendo. That being said, the Cardinals still have the personnel to have an effective rushing attack. Two things here. Number one, Louisville over the past, it feels like Louisville's always had really good running backs, and it's always been a by-committee approach outside of a couple seasons to where, Bilal Powell was the lead rusher, Brandon Radcliffe for a season, so on and so forth. It feels like Louisville has consistently reloaded at the position to the point to where it's really never truly a concern for the fan base is whether or not the running backs room is going to be good. Even in the past 5 years, you have had guys like Tyon Evans, Jalen Mitchell, Travion Cooley, Hassan Hall, Javian Hawkins come and go from this program. And when they've left, we're always sitting here thinking, man, it's going to be hard to really replace that guy. And another guy steps into that place. When Travion Cooley left, when Tyon Evans entered the draft, when Jalen Mitchell left, we were wondering if Jawhar Jordan could be that guy and if Isaac Guerendo could be that guy. Obviously, they proved to be those guys. Louisville was one of the only two schools that had two running backs invited to the NFL Combine. One of the other school was Georgia, and Georgia did not have any of their running backs drafted. Louisville did. Now, I'm not saying that Louisville's rushing attack is better than Georgia's. I'm saying that to say this. If you look player by player, it's going to be challenging to replace those two guys. But the room that you have, I think, is really, really talented. At the very, very least, it's going to be serviceable. But I think that the position is going to show and turn a lot of people's heads. Don't overlook this group. Yes, they lost Penny Boone. And I'm not going to, spew any BS or anything like that. I think Penny Boone would have been a great running back in the ACC. He's going to be a fantastic player in the Big 12. Losing him sucks, but I know the questions of attitude and other things. It is what it is. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but losing Penny Boone sucks. But it's going to open the door for some other guys to get more carries. First up, is this the year that Maurice Turner is able to take over that lead role spot? Year one, he was a situational player until Tyon Evans, Jalen Mitchell, and Travion Cooley were unavailable. And then it was the Jawhar Jordan Maurice Turner show at the end of the season. His freshman year ended with a bang in the Wasabi Fenway Bowl, where he rushed for over 100 yards. And he had 160 yards in that game. But overall, had some bright moments. This past year, I was expecting a little bit more from him, but the 5'10" native of Georgia played behind Jawhar Jordan and behind Isaac Guerendo. And when his number was called, he was, I would say, serviceable. He averaged 4.6 yards per carry, so I think he was as good as expected. This is the season where I do believe that he is going to be able to have a breakout year. I have been extremely adamant that I'm a firm believer in what Maurice Turner brings to this group. I think he is ultimately a better runner in between the tackles than Jawhar Jordan. I don't think he has that, exceptional second-level speed and ability to make guys miss. But I think Maurice Turner is better in between the tackles. I think he's going to play a factor in the passing game out of the backfield as well with Tyler Shuck and playing into that read option type mentality that Louisville could very well have. What could we be looking at in terms of statistical numbers? Because, he took a step back this past year. He scored his first touchdown, but he took a step back in terms of rushing yards. I think he's going to get over 500 yards. One of my takes of the year, so to speak, is that Maurice Turner will lead this team in rushing. I think that this is the year that he's going to break out, and you can't, overlook another year of development in the collegiate strength and conditioning program, another year in the system, etc. One of the big things to focus on with this group is the emergence of Don Chaney Jr., transferred in from Miami. And this is an interesting situation here because Don Chaney, his first season in Miami, ran for 322 yards and 3 touchdowns. Looked like he was going to be a star in Coral Gables. And then he got struck by the injury bug, played 2 games his sophomore year and tore his ACL, missed the entirety of that season, got injured, had a lower body injury in fall camp in 2022, and only appeared in 1 game. So solid first year. Next 2 years, he appears in 3 total games. In 2023, he bounces back a little bit after injury. 94 carries, 478 yards, 2 touchdowns. So career highs in carries and yards. He showed at times, what you thought Don Chaney was going to turn into. 5'10", 210 pounds, a rare blend of speed and strength that, could basically scream lead running back for a Power 5 team. Now, like Louisville, Miami was a by-committee running back core. He had 12 for 85 against Florida State. He had 17 for 63 against Clemson, 24 for 106 against Georgia Tech, which was his best game of the season. 7 for 73 and a touchdown against Bethune-Cookman. And I won't get too much more into the statistics. But this is the one where we really have to focus, like, what version of Don Chaney is Louisville going to get? Like Tyler Shuck, like we mentioned yesterday, the best ability is availability. Don Chaney Jr., to be effective for this squad, has to be able to stay on the field. And if he's able to stay on the field, then I think good things are going to happen. I think that he and Maurice Turner have differentiating skill sets to where they can sort of play off of one another, and it will be all based upon matchups. And I think that the talent is obviously there. It's just a matter of whether or not he's able to put that together. I like the way that one publication put it. It might have been Sports Illustrated, but I feel like Miami got a couple of teasers of how good Cheney can be. And if he's fully healthy, who knows? Now, he has 2 years of eligibility remaining. Will he use those 2 years? That is to be determined because of shelf life for running backs in the NFL. But I'm really interested to see how good he's able to play year one. Louisville has been a traditional spot where running backs can come in from different places to try to maybe not rehabilitate their career, but revitalize it, and they've been able to do so successfully. So it looks like Maurice Turner, Don Chaney Jr. are going to be your 1-2 punch for the Cardinals this fall, which is a great duo to have. But there are two other guys that I feel like are on the outside looking in, but definitely could play key roles for the Cardinals respectively this year. Keyjuan Brown and Isaac Brown. Will discuss both of those players coming up here after we talk to you about our friends and the title sponsor of the show, Gametime. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Gametime. Look, I am a huge proponent of utilizing one ticket service for sporting events. I have switched to Gametime at the back end of the collegiate football season, and I haven't looked back since. Gametime has been my one-stop shop for all my sporting event needs and concert tickets as well. And one thing that I failed to do early on that I don't want to see you all make the same mistake is not downloading the Gametime app. Gametime app is where you need to go. You get all-in pricing options, so you can check out the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. You get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, and your purchase, is covered with most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. It makes the stressful trend of buying tickets easy. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets, NCAA tickets, NFL tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Cardinal fans, if you continually find yourself tired of all the shouting on either Fox Sports or ESPN, you need to make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube with a free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. Welcome back in. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Louisville. Definitely appreciate you all for making us your first listen of the day, covering everything Louisville Cardinals. We continue along in our running backs preview ahead of the 2024 college football season. I think that Louisville will have a solid ACC running back duo in Maurice Turner and Don Chaney Jr. But one trend over the past decade or so has been there's always one, maybe even two players in the running backs room that's not talked about early on that could rise to the occasion, burst onto the scene, and have a breakout caliber season. This season, it would be either Keyjuan Brown or Isaac Brown. Now, it's hard for a true freshman to have a breakout season because there's no previous body of work to compare it to. But that's not the case for Keyjuan Brown. Keyjuan Brown has completed his first season at Louisville, had 11 carries for 65 yards and a touchdown that really came all against Murray State, where he averaged 5.9 yards per carry. He'll be a redshirt this season, the 5'10", 205-pound native of Atlanta, Georgia. In that game, impressed a lot of people. Now, considering the opponent, you have to take away a little bit of the significance from the performance, but I think that was the first opportunity for the fan base to see what Keyjuan Brown can do on the field. And the next step for him is to be sort of that tertiary option, because we saw Louisville gets multiple running backs involved. Now, is he going to have as many carries as Maurice Turner did last year as the third option? Probably not. But I do think that Keyjuan Brown will have a larger role this season. I think you could see some short yardage situations, goal line situations, because one of the things that Brown brings to the table is the thing that I was most excited about when the Cardinals got his commitment on a late flip from Purdue to Louisville, right when Jeff Brom began his tenure here in the Derby City. And that is just how hard he runs in between the tackles. I think that he could be what Louisville fans were hoping L.J. Scott would have been. I know that I'm sort of reaching back and going back in the memory books here, but you remember when L.J. Scott joined the program, and the hope was, with his size and strength and power, that he was going to be sort of like how Bilal Powell was. Obviously not to that level, but, sort of in that same line. Scott really was never able to find a consistent level of production. I think he dealt with injuries as well, and he ended up transferring out. But I think that that's the same sort of trajectory that you're hoping to see Keyjuan Brown, rise into, is that power back who has an underrated amount of speed that could, I'm not going to say fill the Penny Boone role, but sort of do some of the things that Penny Boone was going to do here at Louisville, break a lot of tackles and, catch a lot of people off guard with the underrated speed. So I think that Keyjuan Brown is one of the players on the roster that could be in line for a breakout season, because running back position, there's a lot of rotating players. Louisville's been a school that will rotate 3 guys at that position. They did it last year. I'm not sure what the carry splits are going to be like next season, but I do think that Keyjuan Brown will definitely play a role. So that's something definitely to focus on. The other player in this conversation is Isaac Brown, who was my favorite commitment from the Flyville 24 class. He was ranked as a 3-star level prospect according to the 24/7 Sports Composite ranking, 523rd best player in the country, 44th best running back, 66th best prospect in the state of Florida. Brown, 5'9", 180 pounds, played at Homestead, Florida, helped his team to multiple Florida 3M state final appearances. He was a dual sport athlete, excelled in track as well. Very easily could be the fastest player on the roster and thus the most explosive player. I think that he is going to be an absolute star. Will it be year one, though? I don't think so unless he has to be. I think that Louisville is going to allow him to ease his way in and, get in the weight room and just continue to learn the playbook and get some game reps. And then maybe at the end of the season, we might see him in a larger capacity, in a larger role. But if injuries don't necessarily happen, which, knock on wood, you hope they do not, then you might not see a ton of Isaac Brown. But I do think that Isaac Brown is the most talented running back on this team. He is explosive as it gets. I remember when Louisville got his commitment a couple of years ago, I got a text from a friend of mine who is a national scout that focuses a ton on the Southeast and the South heading into Texas. He said to me, the fact that the in-state schools let Isaac Brown go was a sore mistake, and he will be a phenom at Louisville. Just goes to show you that, I mean, a lot of very talented players will slip through the cracks with in-state recruiting in the Sunshine State, in the state of Florida, because of the number of highly talented guys. So Isaac has been highly thought of. According to Andrew Ivins, director of scouting for 24/7 Sports, he says he's a new age scat back that has also proven to be one of the top return men. Naturally low center of gravity combined with elite burst that makes it extremely difficult for defenders to get him on the ground. Was utilized in a variety of different ways for a Homestead program that made back-to-back appearances in Florida's 3M title game. Well, it's actually back-to-back now, but projects as a potential yards after catch machine at the Power 5 level that can help supplement the passing attack while also trying to flip the field via the return game. Isaac Brown is a star in the making. Just wait. I'm not sure how much opportunity he's going to get this season being a true freshman. So let's take a look at the depth chart. Let's take a look at what to expect from this position group in 2024. We'll discuss that here in the next segment. Into the final segment of this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Thanks again for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked On Louisville, free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. The depth chart, I feel like, just like for the quarterback position, we sort of have an idea of what it's going to be. But it's a little bit more challenging because we don't know who the exact starter is. It could be Maurice Turner. It could be Don Chaney Jr. I think it's going to be one of those two guys. This could very well be a situation to where you have like one of those depth chart formalities where you kind of keep it close to chest. It is Don Chaney Jr. or Maurice Turner. And I think that that's probably the more likely outcome of the two. If it wasn't for that, I think that Maurice Turner's probably the penciled-in starter if you made me choose one of those two players. After those two guys, you're sort of in a wait-and-see approach. I think Keyjuan Brown's going to be your third string right away with Isaac Brown right behind him. You also have Duke Watson, top 500 recruit from the 2024 class, who could also factor into the mix with a solid fall camp. He is on the outside looking in. Both true freshmen are at the moment. Now, we know that Louisville likes to rotate guys in and out. They sort of had to do so this year with Jawhar Jordan dealing with injury for the last half of the year. Assuming that the Cardinals can keep a clean bill of health, which in the running backs department, it's tough to do because there's so much wear and tear on the body. Getting hit often as a running back. Let's say, hypothetically, Louisville's able to stay primarily healthy where guys don't miss an extended amount of time. I think that Maurice Turner, Don Chaney Jr. are probably going to get about 85 to 90% of the carries in the Louisville backfield, and the rest is split up probably with Keyjuan Brown. I think Isaac Brown could be a player that is involved with running back screens, passes that are thrown out into the flat to where you allow him to utilize that explosiveness and quickness and overall speed to make things work. I think that Isaac Brown is going to factor into the return game and be solid on special teams probably right away. So your three players that are going to receive the majority of the touches are going to be Turner, Cheney, and Keyjuan Brown, with Isaac Brown and Duke Watson sort of serving as depth pieces that can rise to the occasion and receive some substantial snaps if need be. Another thing that often gets overlooked, I know that at times like Louisville tried to run the RPO last year with Jack Plummer. Plummer's not really a great running quarterback, being 6'5", 6'6", just wasn't really all that fast. I mean, he was able to sort of pick out spots to where he would go out and make the plays extend with his legs. And he did that at times, and, not trying to disrespect Plummer, but he's not a dual threat. Tyler Shuck, assuming that Louisville's going to try to keep him as healthy as they can, so they might limit some of the RPO opportunities. But Shough, I think, is at his most dangerous as a quarterback when you factor in the possibility of him utilizing his legs. Shough is quicker than Plummer, and I think that you're going to see maybe some more designed runs, but also some more, if it's RPOs, scrambles, so on and so forth. So overall, there's a lot that goes into sort of, discussing what the workload is going to be. And Louisville ran the ball a ton last year, basically because they had to, because at times Jack Plummer was serviceable, but he sort of handicapped the ceiling of your team. I still think that Louisville's going to try to establish the run this season, and I think the offensive line play is going to be pretty comparable to what we saw last season. You have to replace Willie Tyler, Eric Miller, Brian Hudson, but you bring in Monroe Mills, you bring in some Power 5 guys, you bring in Pete Nigra, Jonathan Mendoza, Renato Brown is back. And it seems like he's going to be ready for at least the start of the season. He went out with a season-ending injury right before that Pittsburgh game. So you're going to see Louisville throw the ball probably substantially more. I'll just put it at that. But what I will say is that I do think that there still is going to be an emphasis and focus on establishing the run, because you do that, and I think that it creates, the opportunity for play actions, and you have some explosive receivers. You have great tight end play this season. So tight ends have been key features in Jeff Brom's offenses ever since he became a head coach, even when he was an offensive coordinator as well. With better tight end play, that's going to take away some targets. That's going to take away some carries. So a well-rounded, more depth, more balanced offensive approach, I think, could help the offense overall, because you're making yourself less one-dimensional, but it hurts the running backs because there's not going to be as many carries, at least in my opinion. But it's really hard to tell what that's going to look like. So like I said, if you take away anything from this episode, is that it's extremely difficult to replace Jawhar Jordan and Isaac Guerendo. Both those guys got drafted for a reason. That said, this running backs room will still be effective, and they will get the job done for the Cardinals on the ground in the rushing attack. I believe that to be the case. On the next episode of the show, we continue in our position preview series, now going to the wide receiver position. We will probably conduct that episode later on in the week, so be sure to stay tuned. But everyone have a great day. We'll see you right back here very soon.